Good evening, guys. Good evening, Philippines. Welcome to our fourth episode of the Fast Times of the Manila Times video vlog. What's up with the industry now? Alain, ano ba nangyari sa mundo ng motoring ngayong lingkong to?
Yes,
Big
nag-launch
news.
si Isuzu. Nag-launch sila ng ng bagong generation Isuzu D-Max. It's almost looks the same, almost looks the same on the outside, but actually inside everything is all new. They still use the same engines. They still use the same RZ40 engines and the 4JJ3 engine offerings. Pero they added a lot more safety features which makes it look safe. Pero I'm not gonna lie, ang pogi niya tignan.
To the untrained eye, it looks similar to the current DMAX, pero it's bigger and it's wider.
Also, it's also the first D-Max to be offered with the rear locking diff.
Do you think it will sell, Isaac?
The off-road enthusiast, definitely. Since having the rear locking diff makes it easier. Yung mga situations where the rear wheel or the front wheel would lift, yung parang magka-three wheel na lang siya, ganon. There's no freewheeling, basically.
Okay.
Walang wheel na gumagalaw kapag naka-ere siya.
Si Francis may take dyan sa manual saka sa automatic na may rear diff. Ano ba yun, Francis?
Well, no, I think most hardcore off-roaders naman who require a locking diff will probably opt for a manual transmission. You'll only use a locking diff if you're in really slippery conditions where you have to lock the diffs to maintain traction. So if you have a automatic, chances are you're probably not going to use a locking diff on your day-to-day commute.
Itong D-Max na to, it's been released here for almost a year already under the D-Max V-Cross name. So locally, lahat ng nagmo-modify, lahat na nag-race, and even down to the utility users na nagagamit na siya, and you can really tell its success in the market. Yung maganda din dito, sir, yung comfort levels niya and also yung luxury and refinement niya as compared to what it was in the previous generations. Medyo mahirap na to say na it hasn't advanced kasi leather na yung loob, diba? Leather wrapped steering wheel and all.
Yeah.
And I think this is one reason why also Mazda is using this D-Max as the base of the BT50. It's a very simple engine to tinker with and also keep as a customer. Simple lang siya to keep. Change the oil, change the liquids, and it'll run forever.
I hope they do good this year dahil a lot is banking on that new variant. Dahil alam ko, yung production din nila, hindi na rin dito, di ba? Thailand na rin galing yung pickups ng ng Isuzu, di ba, Chewy?
Yes, sir. Yung naiwan lang dyan, I believe, is to be produced in the Philippines is the Mirage, the L300, and the Vios are the last three that you can get.
Alain, anong tingin mo doon sa pricing naman ng D-Max?
Okay naman yung pricing niya, pero for the top of the line LSE, 1,867,000 pesos.
So if you're in the market for a pickup, would you consider the D-Max?
If you're in the market for a D-Max, honestly, I would, for pricing wise, I would definitely pick the D-Max, especially yung mid-range models nila. They're fine as is.
Well, next topic is I was lucky enough to have driven the Porsche Tycan, even just for a few hours around the metropolis. Kung may pera lang ako, bibili ako nung kaya lang I couldn't afford it. It's too expensive for me.
How was the drive?
Maganda siya. Maski ihataw mo siya, Francis, walang tunog. Para kang balang binaril sa kanyon. Grabe, ang tulin ng auto yun. Saka maganda pa sa Porsche na ganyan, people stare at you. Feel like a rock star when you're driving it on the road. Saka napapansin ko, pag mga ganung kotse dala mo, traffic gives way to you. Kasi Porsche
I heard that it's the most Porsche of Porsches daw eh.
Oo,
Yung drive niya, parang the soul of the Porsche DNA daw. Yun yung nalabas ng Taycan.
Saka alam mong high-tech siya, when you step inside the cockpit. Ako, I'm not a Porsche owner, pero sanay tayo sa ordinary Japanese car. So, wow factor, di ba? Pero if you look at the other Porsche models, it's a it's simplicity in a Porsche kind of way. Every button is a function, walang landi. Ito lahat 'to gumagana. Ang ganda ng auto. Gusto ko nang iuwi kaya lang bawal eh. There's an unwritten order for PG from Germany for PGA to be active in selling EVs. Kasi dito sa Pilipinas lang yata hindi nagbebenta noon eh.
Mm-mm.
In other regions sa Southeast Asia, all of the Porsche distributors have EVs in their showrooms. Kasi may infrastructure. Ang problema sa atin, wala tayong infrastructure eh. Like when you take kaya ginagawa ng Porsche, if you buy the Tycan, they will install a fast charger in your house. And bibigyan kanila ng portable charger kung saan ka. Kasi pwede mo saksak sa pader eh.
That's also what they do because of the limitation nga of charging stations around the metro. Normally, nakapackage yan, yung mga chargers, installation of chargers. I think they have to recalibrate the electrical flow and current in your house or wherever you plan to park your car. Kasi nga, iba yung requirement I believe.
Parang yata parang ang PJ is looking at installing or parang putting up a charging station for their EVs in BGC and in Alabang. Ang problema rito is yung ang laki ng amount na involved for you to establish, for you to put up a charging station mahal eh.
There's a strange issue also with electric cars in the Philippines because unlike in a lot of other countries, we're still running on coal power. So the total emissions released by your vehicle, an electric car in the Philippines will be more than an equivalent gasoline-powered car because of the source of energy. So another big issue that we have to tackle here is not just infrastructure for charging, but also renewable energy sources to power these electric vehicles.
So, inaalala ko to, baka pag sinaksak mo sa bahay mo, yung buong subdivision mo, mawalan ng kuryente, di ba? Dahil supply fluctuating dito lang, nung isang gabi, nagpa-fluctuate yung kuryente. Pagka, lalo na nung Pasko, pag sabay-sabay nagbukas ng ilaw, saka ng Christmas lights, yung buong subdivision, parang yung load, hirap yung yung transformer sa labas ng subdivision namin. Kaya, I don't know, sana ma-address din ng, ng power generators, yung mga ganong issues. So, guys, moving on to the next topic.
Oh, sorry, Dino. Can I make something secret before we move on? Sorry, boss.
Yeah.
I just wanted to greet my racing mentor, Cookie Ramirez. Cookie, wherever you are up in heaven, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Cookie.
We miss you.
Let's move on to our next topic, which is the video review of the CX Mazda. What model was that, Isaac? You test drove?
Mazda CX-9.
The Mazda CX-9, he drove it. Let's watch Ike's take on the Mazda CX-9.
This is the Mazda CX-9, and despite being already a few years old, it's still arguably one of the most handsome mid-size SUVs out there. If you like the exterior, you're gonna love the interior even more. It really looks lovely in here, thanks to the generous use of Napa leather and real wood trims. There's also a beautifully sounding 12-speaker Bose sound system, and you really have to hear it in person in order to appreciate how good the sound system is. The 7-inch digital gauges also look nice, blending well with the analog gauges. And then as for the infotainment, this is still the first generation Mazda Connect infotainment system. And while it's still an easy system to use thanks to the rotary knob controller, it is starting to look a bit outdated when compared to the second generation system in the all-new Mazda 3 and CX-30. As for practicality, since this is a unibody SUV, mas mababa yung kanyang floor height, which means there's more vertical room inside. The first and second rows have generous amounts of space. And while the third row is best left for kids, it's still a lot better than what you would find in a Toyota Fortuner or a Mitsubishi Montero Sport. Trunk space is also pretty generous since the second and third row seats fold flat under the floor. Now, this car is powered by a 2.5-liter inline-4 turbocharged gasoline engine, and this engine produces 231 horsepower and 420 Nm of torque from as early as 2,000 RPM. This is then mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission driving all 4 wheels. So as for the driving experience of the Mazda CX-9, my goodness, an SUV this big has no right to be this sporty, but the Mazda CX-9 exists, and dude, it's a very sporty SUV. Of course, it's not a Mazda MX-5 kind of sportiness, but utang na loob, there's no other SUV sa segment nito that has the ability to handle this well sa corners. It's a genuinely fun to drive large SUV, and contributing to those factors is the steering. It feels wonderful for a car like this. It's not as responsive, of course, as a Mazda MX-5 because syempre it's a big SUV, so it has to balance between stability. So hindi dapat super reactive yung steering mo na pagdating sa highway, sa long distance drives, super reactive niya to a point na lagi ka nakakaroon ng steering correction sa man. So it has to be stable. Dapat hindi siya yung ganun ka super reactive, no? But at the same time, kapag you turn the wheel even more, kapag mas nakaliko na yung steering wheel even more, it becomes even more responsive. So that's Mazda's ability on making this car feel stable at high speed sa highway kapag let's say papunta ka ng Baguio or mga ganyan. And at the same time, kapag nasa mga winding roads ka, sa mga twisty roads, as the wheel is turned even more, kapag mas likong-liko siya, mas responsive yung pakiramdam ng steering. And that makes this car both an excellent highway cruiser and a fun to drive sporty mid-size SUV, which an SUV this big has no right to be this sporty, to be honest. That's why I'm loving the Mazda CX-9 so much. I am a type of person who loves driving. I never actually want to be chauffeured around. Basta ako yung nagda-drive. So if I were in this segment, no choice but to get the Mazda CX-9 because I love driving so much. But at the same time, it's also a comfortable mid-size SUV. Kung gusto mong ma-chauffeur ka, kapag tamad ka na mag-drive, pagod ka na mag-drive sa mga business meeting mo, mga ganyan, walang problema yun because this car is super refined. It's really quiet. Though the suspension is a bit firm because yun nga, in the pursuit of making this SUV sporty, medyo mas firm yung suspension niya in order to, syempre, to keep the body flat kapag napunta ka sa mga corners. But it's not too bad. It's saktong stiff lang, hindi yung uncomfortable. Either way, ako rin yung person na gusto ko medyo ramdam ko pa yung kalsada. Ayaw ko rin yung super isolated. Since nga, I really still prefer to have that sense of connection from the outside world kapag nagda-drive ka. But, yun nga, the suspension is firm but not uncomfortable. Hindi siya yung matagtag. Saktong firm lang para to a point na it's fun to drive but not matagtag. And then there's the 2.5-liter gasoline turbo engine, this Skyactiv G turbo engine. So, Mazda uses a dynamic pressure turbo, aka VGT na lang yung ibig sabihin. It's basically a VGT, marketing jargon ng Mazda yung dynamic pressure turbo. And, ang maganda sa kanya is, I normally don't like turbo engines kapag nasa low end ng RPM range kasi they tend to be laggy, ang tindi ng turbo lag. Let's say, green na yung stoplight, gusto mong umarangkada, may onting delay. But this engine feels so normal. This engine doesn't have the usual quirk na apak mo, turbo lag, then aandar na siya, lane departure warning. Tumunog na yun, sorry. Hindi kasi, alam mo naman Pilipinas, yung mga lane marking sa atin, usually hindi man kasya yung length ng sasakyan, no? I mean yung width niya. But anyway, yun nga, the turbo engine feels so normal. It feels so much like a naturally aspirated engine. There's no lag at the low RPM. So kapag aarangkada ka, it feels just like a normal gasoline engine. Wala siyang turbo lag. And kapag gusto mong overtake, may onting turbo lag pero super onti lang. Which makes this engine super enjoyable to use kapag you wanna do spirited driving or for overtaking slow vehicles. And with 420 Newton meters of torque in a gasoline turbo engine, that's a lot of torque. That's diesel levels of torque. Which makes me confident with this car in overtaking not just one car but two cars na magkakadikit. This car just goes kapag umapak ka sa gas. Along with the brakes Mazda makes some of the best brake feel rather sa industry, which means this is such a good brake system to modulate kapag let's say you're driving through curves, kapag nasa stoplight ka. And these factors just make the Mazda CX-9 one of the best, actually not one of the best, the best mid-size SUV in terms of the driving experience. It's bar none my most favorite mid-size SUV on sale in terms of the driving experience. It's my favorite SUV out there.
Now, as for fuel economy, I was able to achieve around 7.7 to 8.2 kilometers per liter, which is actually pretty good for a mid-size gasoline-powered SUV with this amount of performance. This Mazda CX-9 signature also comes with a number of driver assist systems, such as lane departure warning, lane keeping assist, blind spot warning, rear cross traffic alert, adaptive LED headlights, and the 360-degree camera system. The Mazda CX-9 starts at 2,380,000 pesos, while this top-of-the-line signature variant we have here costs a little under 3 million pesos. If you're looking for a luxurious, practical, yet fun-to-drive mid-size SUV, your only choice in this segment is basically the Mazda CX-9. There's no other SUV at this price point that blends luxury, practicality, and sportiness all in a handsome and well-engineered package.
Guys, we have our guest for this evening, the guys from Mazda, headed by their big kahuna, Steven Tan, and Sol and Ira. Oh, Steven Tan's in the house, everybody.
Hello,
Good
Dino.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. I come in a minute early just to test out the equipment. Is this okay?
Nah, good, dude. We can hear you.
Okay.
So, how's the first quarter for Mazda so far?
It's been the first quarter will be ending in March. So far, it's been encouraging, Dino.
Good,
We
good.
had we've already had 3 months consecutive sales increase. November there was a dip, but if we take November as one dip, the sales started to recover from the month of September. In fact, so we had a good 6 months.
So Stephen, I'd like to say I contributed to that growth.
Francis just got his Mazda yesterday.
No, really, Francis?
I picked up a Mazda 6 wagon yesterday for my wife.
Wow,
And
thank you.
Ira assisted with me with that, and I thanked her earlier off air.
Thank you very much, Francis.
Oh, thank you.
So now you have two brand ambassadors here, Steven. You have Ike and Francis Aguila. Okay. So we start with Isaac. Isaac, do you have a question for our boss?
Does Mazda have any electrification plans for its lineup for the next few years or so? And if any, can we expect those electrified cars to come here in the Philippines?
Mazda's strategy is that they will introduce products that are right time. Appropriate timing is important. If you put a product into the market that is just a maybe technology demonstration and it's not suitable or not at the right time, it really undermines the brand. If you put an electric car in the market today and it has very narrow appeal, that means very few people can afford it or very few people can make it practical. It really undermines the brand itself on what it wants to achieve. I think the time will come, but it's not yet now.
My question is in line with what Sir Steven said earlier, that the Philippines is not ready to introduce the Sky Active X engines introduced in the CX-30 and the Mazda 3, correct? What factors did you consider that made you did not decide to bring the Sky Active X here?
The Sky Active X is a technology that requires very clean fuel. At a minimum, it is a Euro 6 standard, which is a 06 will be a fuel that has zero sulfur. There is a cost associated with going to Euro 6, like the refinery, and the fuel supply and the fuel provider will have to come to a decision on whether it's the right time to do it. Sky Active X requires a minimum of Euro 6 fuel, zero sulfur. Because Sky Active X is a pretty marvelous technology where when we look at the combustion of the air fuel mixture, Sky Active X today is the most efficient engine in terms of using fuel. If you look at the normal air fuel mixture, it's 1 to maybe 14.6. It's been tested in the lab that Sky Active X can go up to 35, 40, sometimes even 60 parts.
Does it require to have like at least a specific kind of fuel to run Sky Active X?
It doesn't require specific fuel. It just requires a Euro 6 fuel. But it does have its costs, like technology always costs. So if the engine of Sky Active X costs an extra amount of money and the fuel costs an extra money, it may not be economically feasible for our kind of a country, and we are very similar to a lot of our neighbors. So you won't see them in neighbors as well.
So what can we look forward to with Mazda this year? Any new vehicle introductions that you're planning, or any new perhaps events or activities that we can look forward to? Not necessarily from the media side, perhaps most especially on the consumer level. Like, is there anything in plan?
I like to say that we have plans and stuff that's happening this year, and the entire team focus really is on making sure that our big dealer partners a robust business situation status. The business as usual doesn't apply. We still have to look at the market, look at the customer. Cost has gone up, volume has come down. When volume comes down, and in 2020, you've seen that the volume compared to 2019 has fallen by 40%. And so where we've been fortunate is that we haven't gone into an expansion mode. If a business is new and they've gone into an expansion mode and open up a lot of dealership, it becomes really, really hard. So we didn't do that, and we remain the same. And the dealers are robust and they're strong, and so we've been able to keep going without any reduction at all. The last thing we want to do is to reduce our workforce or downsize. We have not downsized at all. We've kept everybody safe. Our expenses have gone up, so we are watching costs very, very closely, but we're also making sure that the dealers are being supported by the selling of cars. It hasn't gone back to pre-pandemic, but it has gotten better in the last 6 months. But we've also invested in the customer as well. Last year, we announced a 5 years free service plan. We are, I guess, maybe the first of the mass market to do that. And instead of deepening more and more money, discounting the customer, why don't we assure the customer and protect them against inflation of the next 5 years? If you take a car loan and typically, so if you take a 5 years plan, 5 years free service, it stabilizes your predictability in terms of your spending expenses in the budgeting. So this year, back to your question about what are the plans that we have for this year, it's basically the same path as we were doing before, taking care of the customer. We redesigned our website. That the website has been part of our strategy in taking care of the customer. Right now, buying a car is not so difficult. You can go online to it, and if you want to go kick the tires and talk to somebody, which eventually they do, you can go in and see the dealership. And lastly, I think something that it's really important to a car brand is trust.
Does it help that you are not just a businessman or not just a car executive, but does it help that you are a car guy and you understand the needs and wants of your customer?
It's really important to have empathy. I think empathy is a elusive, sometimes ambiguous characteristic. But if you have empathy, you're able to understand what people go through in the journey of the car. It can be painful, right? Although I'm really lucky to be working here. This is a country of people who are very passionate about cars. We love cars. And got a bunch of guys sitting together eventually talk about cars, nothing else. That's all they do. And I am able to participate in that. I can share my stories. I can talk about geeky stuff about cars. I'm truly in love with the automotive. And it's not just Mazda. I just love things, basically cars.
Yeah, and actually, really got to thank you for immersing yourself, because for those who don't know, Sir Steven Tan is actually not Filipino, though he spent quite a lot of time in the Philippines, and he's really immersed himself into the market to know and get to understand the needs and wants of the Filipino customer. And also, you support the grassroots movement of racing with AAP. So really, thank you very, very, very much for that one. So just to even be relatable to what's happening now, how will you keep the positive customer experience, especially with this new safeguard duty that's coming up? What plan to keep and to attract the customers of Mazda?
This safeguard thing is something that you have to go through the process, right? The process is what the DTI has taken upon itself to investigate. It's permissible under the law, and we as a corporate citizen should respect the process. So we just have to go through the process. And so if the question is that how do you manage the customer expectation in the face of a DTI safeguard, not for the sake of publicity, but I've always talked about, this is Mazda, this is what I represent. And I said, I'm very lucky to represent Mazda because this brand is a brand that have people behind it that are very competent, that are very good engineers and very good design, and they build really super nice cars. So I'm not Mazda, but I represent the brand. So I'm very proud to represent the brand in the Philippines. This SG thing in the question is a little slightly different take on it, but it really levels everybody that like, if you want to buy a car, you got to pay for it. But having said that, we've also been very lucky because the pandemic happened and the pandemic slows down the economy, but we had a lot of cars that came in last year. They were 2020 model. They're very, very new. So we don't have cars that are longer than like a long time. Our cars are pretty fresh. We were very lucky, right? So I'll spend a minute talking about how luck and sometimes play into your situation. I was very worried, but we did build like a big warehouse before the pandemic. So we built this big warehouse. For some of you that hasn't seen it, it's kind of big. Maybe too big, but we built it and we finished building it in November, December of 2019. And we took our bunch of cars and we moved them into a warehouse and then we shut the door. And then Taal Volcano Lake happened, right? So we were saved by that warehouse because the warehouse kind of covered all the cars and all the cars were saved in Laguna from that volcano ashes fall. And then after that, we moved the entire customer service in February into the warehouse, and we have training center called the Center of Excellence. And then in March, the pandemic happened. So kind of like we were almost, if I didn't know better, we were predicting that this kind of things was going to be happening. And then this SGDTI thing happened last month. And so we had vehicles that most of the vehicle, as based on the sales pace, will last us all the way into the end of the 200 days. So the customers don't have to worry about that. But we did run out of two kind of cars. We did run out of MX-5, and we did run out of Mazda 3. So the handful of Mazda 3 in the market now that everybody's like kind of clamoring and buying them up. But by the time, I think next month, we will be finished of Mazda 3, and the Mazda 3 MX-5 will come in to replenish, and those will be subjected to the 70,000. But if you were in the market for CX-5, CX-9, CX-30, Mazda 2, Mazda 6, Francis did, you don't have to pay for the 70,000. And so that's how a seasonal event, and we were lucky to get by because we were doing things before things happened.
You discussed earlier about the customer experience, and as Dino and Jen had mentioned earlier, I'm a recent Mazda convert, and all the things that you said earlier about the customer experience. You talked about extending Yogen 3 to a 5-year program, all of these things. And actually, one thing that hasn't been tackled quite yet was actually the IIHS in the US just named, was it basically your entire model lineup as their top safety picks. And I wanted to ask, because traditionally, and you've been here long enough to see this, traditionally, customer experience, warranties, and safety has not been a priority for most automotive companies who do business in the Philippines, because traditionally, Filipino buyers were not so aware of the importance of all of these factors. How was the decision made to go into this direction of exactly customer loyalty, transparency, and safety?
Wow, this discussion is, I guess, something that's very close to me, right, Francis? About safety.
Yes.
And it's also an evolution of, I guess, I would call it the demographics, right? The demographics goes through a hierarchy of evolution. I think we are poised. Used to be that people think, why do you bother with airbag? It's going to cost money. So now today, airbag is almost like a standard thing that in a car. I wouldn't sit in a car now that has no airbags. I wouldn't sit in a car in a rear seat that has no seat belts, right? And that's just the way it is. And cars has evolved to the point where company has to realize and be aware that, life is precious. And I often talk about this and said, if your most basic needs has been fulfilled, that you're no longer hungry, you got a job, and you drive a car, the next thing is, regardless of what the car is, it has to provide safe, reliable transportation. Like, don't even go into that. It's great to drive, which Mazda is. So Mazda built not only great to drive car, but to be able to build cars that across the line, that is the US IIHS, and be not only safety pick, but safety pick plus, and then to bring the same car into Europe and have a Euro 5 NCAP. Euro 5 NCAP. So that's really huge. That means that if I were to get into a car, I have a peace of mind that if I buy this car and I give it to my son, or I give it to my daughter, and I give it to somebody else, or my wife drives it, or my partner drives it, that they're going to be in like the safest place possible, because there is no truly 100% most reliable, safe car, but you can make it as safe as possible to the point where it's affordable. Because people often ask and says, sometimes the car breaks down. I said, yeah, of course cars break down. There is no such thing as a car that doesn't break down. If an engineer to build a car that is absolutely fail-safe, nobody can afford to buy it. That's a fact, right? But A responsible car company is the one that says, okay, I think we have to do this change. And I often hear this about people say, why so many recalls? Does that mean your car is not reliable? No, it's absolutely opposite. Recall means the company cares about the car and will bring it in and change a fuel pump or change a VCM or change this. If you have a company that doesn't do recall, you better be worried about that. Yeah.
No, I agree, and especially if it's a voluntary recall. It really does show a brand's commitment to its customers.
Yeah, and I think it's beginning to get more educated now that people are willing to accept that the company will do recalls, and sometimes they do many recalls, and that's for your safety. If the company is hiding behind no recall, I think that's something that to be concerned about.
Right. Well, you touched upon. Well, I was going to follow up, and you actually beat me to it again. This is the second time you've touched on a topic before I got a chance to ask. But aside, you went through the basics: reliable transportation, very, very safe. And the next one there was, you said, is after you've taken care of all of that, Mazda has this commitment to having cars that are great to drive. And it's no secret with the team here and with the industry in general that I'm a BMW loyalist. And but I've seen the shift in Mazda, and I don't want to say, and I mean this in a good way. I don't want to say that they're copying a direction, but it feels like the direction of Mazda to move into a more premium segment with full featured and really great to drive. For example, the Zoom moniker I think has been around since I was a teenager, and I don't think it's changed. It's very rare for a car company to have that same philosophy for so long. How do you then how does it affect the strategy now of the company that you're moving into a more premium segment than traditionally Japanese brands have, other than someone like Lexus or or Infiniti? You're kind of in the mid-range.
It's a very hard journey. I always involved in the discussion with Mazda corporate people about the direction. So this is a fairly complicated conversation, Francis. So bear with me about this. It's Mazda is a very small company. It's not only a very small company, but if it chooses to compete with a larger Japanese brand, it's going to be very hard because you need a lot of resources, you need funding and stuff. But they don't have to do that because the time that I spent with Mazda, and my history with Mazda goes all the way back, even when I was in Ford, I was also looking after Mazda too, both in Thailand and here. And so I kind of fell in love with the philosophy they had. Very, very, they have very, very, very good engineers, and they are very, very good designers, right? Those two are in parallel will make a brand itself become somewhat premium. Even if you don't go premium, it will eventually become that because they are so stubborn in their quest for perfection. There is no perfection, but take, for example, one of the best stories is about the new MX-5. We still call it new MX-5, but it's the fourth generation called ND, introduced in 2016. They then back to past. When all sports cars become bigger, heavier, more powerful, they say, no, that's the wrong direction. We have to make it lighter, right? Because it's like Colin Chapman said, add lightness. And if you make a car light, it will be fast by itself. It will be fuel efficient. And so it becomes like a paradox where a sports car that is fuel efficient, that is the most reliable car in the US, of the 4,200 cars, it is the most reliable car. How can that be? That, in one case, explains what Mazda is about. They like to make the car very simple. They like to make it very fuel efficient. If you want to make a car very simple, very fuel, very reliable, it's a very difficult thing to do. It's very, very difficult. But they are the kind of people, they're very stubborn, and I work with them sometimes. It can get sometimes frustrating because they're very stubborn. So I respect the stubbornness, but out of the stubbornnness comes very good things. And, if you take a design of a Mazda from 30 years ago, like the RX-7 FD and the Tomatano NA and a lot of the Mazda 3. One of my favorite Mazda 3 is the first generation Mazda 3 2014. It's beautiful. So if you design a car to be long-lasting and you design to be reliable, eventually people will love the car. and people will pay for it. And even if you have to pay a premium for it, they will pay a premium for it. And that's the journey. As Mazda become more and more premium, the business sometimes can become challenging. I would say the word is challenging, because everybody's trying to beat each other to be the cheapest car possible in the market now, right? And the prices of cars in the market in the last 15 years, the average price hasn't really come up because of competition, but cars has gotten better, right? So it has become cheaper, and Mazda hasn't become cheaper. Mazda has become a bit more expensive generation over generation, but not totally out the league. So I really look forward to this particular journey that I'm in about navigating Mazda to be a premium is a word that is difficult to put your arm around. It's just cars that are better, more love, more loyalty. And one of the phenomena is this, right, Francis? As I go around getting to know the customers, I noticed that Mazda is one of those brands that will, once you buy into a Mazda as a family, that they tend to grow. It tends to push aside other brands in the garage. And I know so many of these people that became Mazda families. They started with one, then there are two, there are three, there are four, there are five. I have a customer walk to the house with 10 Mazda in the house. You know, it's just sometimes ridiculous.
What would you say, Stephen, would be the current value proposition for the brand now? Given that it has evolved over the years, you told us that right now the communication and the philosophy of the brand here is based on trust and relationships. So what are we? So for those who are the generation that didn't know Mazda over the years like that, what can you tell them?
It can sometimes sound philosophical, but this is how I believe things should work, right? Successful brands are the ones that makes your life better. It has to, right? Products like Google, Apple, Amazon, they are successful because they make your life easier, better, simpler. So Mazda philosophy is like that, and for business people like me to implement the brand in the country is to follow that and says, how do we make you better? How do we make your life easier, better, richer, or more enriching? So if you start with a product, take the 7th generation product like the CX-3 or CX-30 or the CX-5, you will see immediately that people often tell me, once you step into the car, you don't really want to let it go anymore because it makes your life simpler. And I say, in what way? They say, I don't know. I can't give you specific, but it makes driving better, easier, less stress. And I hear it over and over again, right? So that's the product side. And to the point where some people who are new to a car and they're used to vehicles that has a lot of gadgets and a lot of things in the car, they step into a Mazda today and says, there is a lack of things for me to do in the car. And that's what car's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to make you feel relaxed, do less distraction. And the job of being in the car is to enjoy the drive and to enjoy the thing and not to fiddle with the screen or fiddle with this and fiddle with that. I'll give you one example. 2 years ago when I went to Japan and there was like training of people that always go there. And they said, if you go into a Mazda 3 today and CX-30 and you touch and you press all the buttons around you, they all have the same feel. And the way that they designed the button was they went through a whole lot of people and they put sensors next to the heart. And they tested different kind of buttons. And the one that makes you feel happiest is the one that is a button. So if you go to different cars and you press the button, you go to Mazda, you press the button, it tends to give you a bit of happiness. And so the value proposition is that the product has to give you happiness, make you relax, enjoy the drive, because driving sometimes is not the best experience ever. Like some people would rather not drive at all. But if you have to drive something that gives you joy and happiness. And on our part, it's to give you an experience that car ownership can be quite painful. You have to bring the car in, doing the service, pay the money, do all kind of things. Sometimes you're going for PMS. So that's inevitable. So if we give you a free service plan for 5 years, for the next 5 years, all you have to do is somebody calls you, you bring the car in, they do what they have to do, and you sit and you have a coffee, and then after that you sign a piece of paper and you're out. There's no anxiety to it. So anxiety and friction is what we try to remove with our website, with the ownership, with the PMS, with the warranty, as little hassle as possible, although there will always be some friction to the ownership. So Francis, I appreciate your feedback over the next couple of years. Ike has his Mazda 6 now for a while, I think maybe 2 years. I appreciate feedback all the time because it's always a learning experience about something we have to improve, something that we don't do well. And sometimes I get really angry when some things don't go well. And I said, like, what do you think of that?
I think this would be a perfect closing question. What can we expect for Mazda this year in terms of product launches? Are we gonna expect new cars or updated cars?
I do have a habit, and that I don't talk about what's coming up, Ike, and I apologize if I don't talk about that, because things are not predictable, and if it happens, it happens. In fact, we almost always, since we started the company in 2012, we've almost always launched at least one new product or refresh product every, sometimes 3 in a year. But this year is, again, I guess, unpredictable. I just want everybody to get through this year, 2021, in one piece. Because it's almost as if like it's a repeat of last year. So, but we've learned more, we've adapted well, all of us. And we said what's going to be new and happening and launches. If we're able to launch a new product, great. If we don't launch a new product, it's fine. And it's okay because, whether it's the new BT50 or something else, there's always something that Mazda is launching. It's launching. They always refresh the product. Sometimes they refresh a product and we don't even talk about it.
Well, with that, Stephen, I would like to thank you for joining us. Sol, Aya, thank you for facilitating this. I know Stephen should be at home resting, and instead he's here with us. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you.
Jen is right. No, we learned a lot of things from you.
Learn a lot of things from everybody. I think about thing is that it's true. People say like, you never stop learning. That's actually true about life, that you never stop learning. There's always something out there. If you think you got it, I'll tell you again, nobody has really just got it. You're always learning all the time.
Well, with that, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Mazda Philippines, for joining this episode of Fast Times by the Manila Times.